The transfer portal train keeps on rolling, and Nick Evers is jumping on. The Oklahoma Sooners quarterback from the 2022 class declared that he will be entering the transfer portal. We'll talk about that, what it means for the Oklahoma Sooners, and what's happening on championship weekend and what it might mean for the college football playoff on today's episode of Locked On Sooners.
You are Locked On Sooners, your daily podcast on the Oklahoma Sooners, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Sooner Nation? Welcome to a special Saturday night recording. You might be listening to it on Sunday edition of Locked On Sooners. It's been a busy couple days since we last talked, Josh. The transfer portal continues to roll. Nick Evers announced on Saturday morning that he is entering the transfer portal after just one season, 1 year with the Oklahoma Sooners. Now, Nick Evers' story, he was originally committed to Florida last December when Dan Mullen, man, I almost forgot Florida's former head coach's name, was fired, and they hired Billy Napier. I guess the conversations that went on between Napier and Evers led to Evers' decommitment from the Gators. He was Jeff Lebby's kind of first priority after, and the way Lebby tells the story, after filling out all his HR paperwork, he immediately drove down to Flower Mound, Texas to recruit Nick Evers after just one season. And very, very, very little playing time, Nick Evers enters the portal, Josh.
Yeah, not much playing time at all. In fact, I was looking it up as we speak here. He threw one pass in the Red River game, but I was looking just to see what the total number of snaps looked like for one Nick Evers. Looks like 6 total snaps that he ran with the Oklahoma Sooners in, obviously, that Texas game. And I do think, it's hard for me not to separate from the idea that a lot of this with Nick Evers right now today isn't connected to just that 49-0 loss to Texas, where your grandma, your grandma's best buddy at, your grandma's best bridge buddy or cards buddy thought, what the heck? Why are we not getting Nick Evers ready to play in this football game? And then lo and behold, the game plays out the way that it does. And you lose that game 49-0, and really became pretty obvious, painfully obvious very quickly in that game that, yeah, a little bit of Wildcat with Braden Willis for a bit might be successful. But once that little bit of success wore off, unless you're going to be able to throw the football in the game or be a little bit more creative or one-dimensional than Oklahoma was with Davis Beville in the game, you weren't going to have any type of success. And it's hard for me, again, to separate from the idea that didn't bother Nick Evers, that he didn't get more of a shot in that game. The other thing, John, that would cross my mind is this. Has Oklahoma just been giving out guarantees to quarterbacks, or the end of season exit interview, which, not the end of the season yet for Oklahoma, right? We'll find out a bowl destination shortly, but the end of the regular season, if there were any sort of exit interviews, if Nick Evers sat down with the staff and said, okay, where am I at in this pecking order? And have there just basically been guarantees given out that Dillon Gabriel, you're the starting quarterback. Jackson Arnold, when you get here after Dillon Gabriel, you're going to be the starting quarterback. Publicly, you're always going to hear, it's this competition and this and that. But maybe some of the results here make me wonder that a little bit. And frankly, I had a couple of people that when Nick Evers, John, in the Cotton Bowl didn't get a legitimate shot, somebody I didn't bring this up at the time, but I think it's worth, pontificating about or dissecting or thinking about now. Was there kind of a handshake agreement with Dillon Gabriel that you weren't going to get Nick Evers, you weren't going to give him a legitimate shot this season? Because that was the moment to give him a chance. And clearly the way the game played out, they needed to give Nick Evers a chance. There's no reason Oklahoma didn't give Nick Evers a chance. And yet, okay, now we find ourselves at this point. So it has me, as you can tell, all sorts of thoughts about the deal. I don't know how I feel about it. We're probably never going to know how to feel about it. And so here we find ourselves. Nick Evers, who was a ballyhooed recruit, is leaving Oklahoma.
So I'm going to go this direction. I don't know. I don't think it's a conspiracy theory. I don't think that there's some ulterior motive to protect Dillon Gabriel or anything like that. Like Dillon Gabriel's a big boy. Jeff Lebby knows he's a big boy. They know that it is what it is. Like that's just the way quarterbacks and quarterbacking goes. It's the way football goes. Next man up mentality. You got to prepare. I don't think that they're like trying to protect anybody by not letting Nick Evers have a chance. I think it's just part of the poor management at times from this coaching staff that we've seen all season long, whether it was an in-game thing or it was a rep thing. I mean, how many times did we pine for Jaron Kanek to get more snaps and he didn't get it, or R. Mason Thomas to get more snaps and he didn't get it? Some of these other younger defensive backs, when the defensive backfield for the Oklahoma Sooners was really struggling, or on defense in general, when guys were struggling to tackle, I mean, they allowed their defensive players to play a ton of snaps all year long without allowing that depth to get opportunities. And so I think maybe this just goes back to just poor management, because all that week they were letting Dillon Gabriel take first team snaps in practice. I remember that very vividly, them talking about that in the build up to the game. They said, we're going to have 3 quarterbacks taking snaps. I think a lot of us assumed that meant Davis Beville, Nick Evers, and General Booty, because most people assumed that he was going to be out of the Red River Showdown after being concussed against TCU. So they let Dillon Gabriel take, first team snaps that week. I think he even said it after the game, or Brent Venables said it. Somebody I remember very clearly from the team saying Dillon Gabriel took first team snaps. That was their first mistake. They should have been giving Davis Beville a lot of those snaps. And I also remember in the pregame for the Cotton Bowl, the Red River Showdown, Dillon Gabriel was out there in warmups taking first team snaps. Those were very valuable snaps. Like, Davis Beville should have been getting those snaps. You knew Dillon Gabriel wasn't going to play. You tried to play some game out there with Dillon Gabriel pretending like he might play to throw everybody off. And you're like, which was stupid. Honestly, that was a very dumb thing. As much as I love Brent Venables and I love, I think Jeff Lebby's a good offensive coordinator at times. It was foolish. It was just not a wise use of snaps when you could have been preparing your quarterback to play in that game. So you let Davis Beville get all the first team snaps that week. You let Nick Evers get all the second team snaps that week when it's clearly obvious that it wasn't going to go your way. And midway through the third quarter, all you're doing is running the football. You're not even letting Davis Beville throw the ball. Then you should have been giving those snaps to Nick Evers. It was just a wasted opportunity in a time where it's really hard to give, true freshman quarterbacks live game reps when you've got a legitimate starter. I mean, how many 1-score games did Oklahoma play this year? A lot. And even in the games that weren't 1-score games, there were some really tight wins at times, and games that were kind of tight a little bit towards the end. And so there weren't going to be a lot of opportunities. There weren't a lot of blowout opportunities for other quarterbacks to get opportunities. So like that game against Texas was prime opportunity to see, okay, what does Nick Evers have? What did you have to lose? You had nothing to lose by throwing him out there for a quarter and a half and opening up the playbook and just seeing what happened. And I mean, there was some talk about like, hey, sometimes you can hurt yourself by throwing a guy out there a little bit too early. I'm like, well, if he's not capable of rising to the occasion of getting his first extended reps, that's more of a mental thing. And maybe he's not the guy, but you'll never know now because you didn't give him the chance. And so I think more of it is just poor management by the coaching staff. And that's something that Brent Venables, Jeff Lebby, they got to improve. When there's opportunities in a blowout to get very valuable snaps for your guys, just give it to them. Again, what's the worst that can happen? You lose 56-0 versus 49-0, or maybe you lose 49-20. Like maybe you put some points on the board. Nick Evers gives you a little bit of a boost by, with his running ability, because you're out there trying to run Davis Beville on quarterback draw and quarterback power, and he's got no running ability whatsoever. He's like less mobile than Landry Jones or Sam Bradford. Like those are not mobile quarterbacks, and you're trying to run quarterback power with Davis Beville. You could have thrown Nick Evers out there, given him the opportunity, just run the ball with Nick Evers if you're going to run the ball. But you didn't give yourself the chance to evaluate your true freshman quarterback, who was a 4-star player, in a game, in live action all you had to go on was practice and spring game. And he did some nice things in the spring game. And I'm sure he improved from that moment. But again, you'll never find out what Nick Evers had because you never gave yourself the chance to properly evaluate that player and many other, freshmen, redshirt freshman players in a game that was way gone by halftime.
You hit on so much there that I want to dive into. I would say this about the lead up to the game, like you said. You brought up something that I find fascinating, and probably one too many times coaching staffs and just the brain trust that is doesn't weigh these two against each other. Honestly, what's more valuable? Playing the little surprise game versus Texas and having them spend more time watching film on Dillon Gabriel that week, or just going all in, like you said, to get Nick Evers all of those reps, to get Davis Beville all of those reps. I think it's a pretty easy argument to make that, look, the surprise factor, that's great. You took away some film study and this and that. There wasn't a ton of film to be studying with Davis Beville or Nick Evers to begin with, right? So once the surprise factor is gone, the surprise factor's gone. Yeah, I guess there's quite a bit of, film study on Dillon Gabriel that you can go through, but man, Texas knew that Dillon Gabriel was your starting quarterback. They've been studying his film ever since he transferred into Oklahoma. So you didn't gain anything by pulling the surprise card there, right? The rest of it, I would say this, and this is maybe a poor example, John, but look at the Big 12 champion in Kansas State, right? What did they do? We thought it was Adrian Martinez. And lo and behold, though Will Howard obviously is somebody that has taken significant snaps and had taken significant snaps before this season, John, they won a Big 12 championship because they were willing to commit to making the move, right? And trusting Will Howard with some difficult situations. And guess what? They reaped the rewards to the tune of a Big 12 championship of that. So, look, I'm not here to tell you that you win the Texas game or this, and that. But, Nick Evers, I can imagine, had to have been, and I thought it at the time, and it's, I think, crystal clear now that on some level, absolutely he was frustrated he did not get a chance in that Texas game. Now the question becomes this, John, and let's kick it around. What does it mean for Oklahoma going forward? And it's not just Nick Evers, by the way. We did hey, not all transfers are created equal. Well, I would put both Nick Evers and Alton Tarber in the category of these are legitimate transfers that we have to talk about, right? Guys that could, now we'll see how each career plays out, away from Oklahoma, but these are careers that hypothetically, at least to this stage, I'll entertain a little fan frustration. I'll entertain the hypothetical that, okay, Oklahoma's maybe losing something serious here. So let's discuss, what does this mean for Oklahoma's quarterback depth going forward? How do you feel about the Alton Tarber situation? There's some interesting transfer portal developments, obviously, with Oklahoma.
But first, we're going to take a little break, and I want to talk to you about BetOnline. BetOnline.net is your number one source for sports betting info, stats, news, and analysis. It's the best place to bet on Major League Baseball, NBA, NHL, NFL, college football. We're winding down the college football season. If you want to get in on the action, go to BetOnline. The fastest and the easiest place to bet on all your favorite sports. Again, MMA, boxing, esports even, whatever you want, it's right there for you at betonline.net. Again, betonline.net is where the game starts. Yeah, Josh, it is significant. And I know on Twitter today, on the social media side, I kind of downplayed things a little bit, but I think it's more just kind of where things stack up. Like Dillon Gabriel's probably coming back. You got Jackson Arnold coming. And so I might have downplayed things, but yes, 4-star quarterback who was highly coveted by Florida, Dan Mullen, a really good quarterbacks coach. He had Dak Prescott at Mississippi State. And now Dak is one of the better quarterbacks in the league. I know I'm a Cowboys fan, so you might take exception to that, but yes, I believe he's one of the better quarterbacks in the NFL. And so there's a good opportunity. Nick Evers could have gone to Florida and been a nice dual threat option for them, for the Gators. And so, yeah, it just kind of comes back to not really knowing what you would have gotten because you never gave yourself the chance. You spoke of Will Howard just a second ago. The reason he was able to be so good this year is because he got so much experience last year when Skylar Thompson got hurt. And he only really showed himself to be kind of more of a game manager, running quarterback Well, all of that experience still provided him the opportunity to take a really good step forward. And so Nick Evers, I mean, might have only been a quarter and a half. It's still valuable experience for him to learn from as he, moves through his college career. Like all those snaps would have been very helpful for him. Even if he would have gone, 2 of 10 for 15 yards and he ran the ball 3 times for, 13 yards or whatever, all of that would have given him valuable film study to work on and work through. Like you do learn from your failures. That's what Brent Venables has talked about all year long, is learning from your failures. And so I would have liked to see them do that. Just give him the opportunity. I get his frustration. I mean, mom on social media posted a GIF saying hallelujah. So you can tell that they're happy that he's in the portal. It'll be interesting to see where he goes. Alton Tarber, that's another one that's going to be interesting because he and Evers both were part of what helped Oklahoma's recruiting class get to number 8 in the 2022 cycle, helped kind of rebuild that class after Lincoln Riley left. So now you've lost 2 pieces. You add in Kevonte Henry, who is not on the Oklahoma Sooners roster on Soonersports.com. So you throw that one in there. That's 2 or 3 of their flips, really 2 flips in particular, but Nick Evers, that's their 3rd one that you've lost from that class. So it'll be interesting. Like, I don't think that we can say that there's significant losses except for Nick Evers, because now you're left right now with Dillon Gabriel and Davis Beville and Jackson Arnold as kind of your quarterback hierarchy, which I think we can assume would be Dillon Gabriel, Jackson Arnold, Davis Beville, even though, as I tweeted on or shared on Twitter, I think if Davis Beville is Dillon Gabriel's backup, it's only in name only. Like, there's no way that Oklahoma would go from Dillon Gabriel to Davis Beville. Now, Alton Tarber, the loss there is he's part of that, trying to revitalize that interior defensive line for the Oklahoma Sooners. So now it's one piece that you've lost that's trying to help rebuild that, because Oklahoma needs to. Like, we know that. Like, that was one of their big issues this year, is that the interior defensive line wasn't stout enough against the run. And that made life a lot more difficult for the linebackers, the edge players. So I think I'm not really ready to say it's a huge loss, but it could prove to be a huge loss. Again, that's a guy that could have played your one tech, your nose tackle position for you. And now you don't have that option. You're going to have to dip back into the well a little bit.
It's disappointing, isn't it? I want to give proper credit where credit is due. I thought this was a very interesting note from Sooner Scoop's Bob Prisbillo. He tweeted out, and obviously he's very, very connected on the recruiting side. That's what our man Bob Prisbillo does. He said, when you go for a furious finish, you never know how it's going to go. Quarterback Nick Evers, defensive lineman Kevonte Henry, defensive lineman Alton Tarber. 3 pieces of Brent Venables' big close, no longer with Oklahoma in less than a year. I thought that was very interesting that he put it that way. I don't know if maybe I would have connected those dots. Probably I should have. Do you chalk it up to a little bit of that, John, that these were late signees? I don't know that I do. I would think that if, whether it's early or late, I know that they weren't committed to you all the way along throughout the process. So that part is obvious. I can wrap my head around that. That makes sense, right? But the fact that you were able to get the flip and ultimately sell Oklahoma, I guess, to me would still lead me to believe that, it wouldn't just turn into a year later. It's, first thing right outside the door. So how do you sort of compartmentalize that? How do you feel about that?
It's really strange to me, because you look at a guy like Tarber and he didn't really play. So I don't know why he thinks he needs to leave, because there's not necessarily anybody that you look at and you're like, oh, they're definitely better, or they're definitely starters next year on the defensive line. I mean, Jalen Redmond took an invite to the Senior Bowl, so he's probably got, or did he? I can't remember. Now I might be making stuff up. I think in my dream, I might have had Jalen Redmond going to the Senior Bowl. So yeah, I think this one is going to be interesting to see, because I don't know what his ceiling is. I don't know what Alton Tarber's ceiling is. I don't know if he's going to be a long-term starter in college football. I mean, there's tons of players that are going to enter the portal, and not all of them are going to find homes. And so I'll be curious to see how that plays out. With, kind of turning the page a little bit, there's been a lot of defensive backs that have entered the portal too. And Josh has got the kind of the full incoming outgoing list so far. And I believe they've already lost like 3 or 4 defensive backs into the transfer portal at this point.
I'll give credit where credit's due. Once again, they did the research for us. Crystal Ball, Oklahoma, which if you're into recruiting is a good follow to begin with, at Seaball, Oklahoma. And they went through, and here's what the transfer portal looks like. Okay. Theo Wease, Clayton Smith, Eaton, Mukes, Henry, Kendall Dennis, Joseph Wette, Ralph Rucker, Tarber, Evers, Bryson Washington. Senior Bowl, Eric Gray, Wanye Morris, Jalen Redmond, and then the NFL draft guys would obviously be Anton Harrison, Wanye, and Eric Gray. And you're bringing in the JUCO kid, Kendall Dolby, and Jacob Lacey, the defensive lineman from Notre Dame. So that's where we're at right now for Oklahoma. And this is, look, it's Saturday going into Sunday. A lot of you, when you hear this, it'll be Sunday. Tomorrow's win, boom, the magic transfer portal door officially opens, even though we've got all this news to report in relation to the transfer portal. It's like, what do they say? NFL free agency. It's like the salary cap. It's the mythical salary cap to some people out there. They're like, okay, well, there's always some way to work around that salary cap. It's kind of how the transfer portal feels right now. It's like, okay, technically we're supposed to be waiting until Monday, and yet I've got all this news of these people going here and going there. So it's like, apparently you don't have to wait until Monday. But anyways, all of which is to say, by Monday, we could have a couple other names that we're tossing into this mix, both incoming, outgoing. So we're probably just getting going. What do you think about the quarterback depth for Oklahoma? I would put myself honestly I think you got to bring somebody in from the portal if you can. Now, I'm not, unrealistic here. And I think I would encourage Oklahoma fans to don't fool yourself. You're not bringing in a great quarterback out of the transfer portal. Okay. You got Dillon Gabriel, you've got Jackson Arnold, and it's going to be tough to get another guy that has started college football or thinks that they've got a chance to start at a place like Oklahoma. You could get kind of a placeholder similar to a Davis Beville, and that's probably about what you're going to get, right, to fill out the room.
Yeah, you're not going to bring in Hudson Card. You're not going to bring in a Casey Thompson type, someone who's started a bunch of games and sees themselves as a starter. You're going to bring in a guy who's been a backup, might have got to play a little bit because of the injury to the starter, like Davis Beville did. But yeah, I don't see them bringing in like a Luke Altmaier, who was a very highly recruited player, I think in the 2021 class. So I don't know if they make any moves at quarterback, to be honest with you. I really don't. You still got Micah Bowens on the roster, although I know a lot of people have high thoughts of him. I don't know. I don't know about him because I haven't seen him play. And, Ralph Rucker's gone. He was kind of your most experienced Oklahoma Sooners quarterback coming into the season with the Sooners, not, in college football. But so now he's out the door. So you're looking at Gabriel, Jackson Arnold, Beville, Bowens. So that's kind of where it lands for me. I do think they should try to bring in somebody of a similar ilk to Davis Beville that has maybe a little bit of experience, but isn't viewed as a starter at the college football level. Somebody that, be able to come in and give you some competitive snaps, compete for that backup quarterback role. But really, to me, honestly, like if I'm the coaching staff, I know you don't want to put a whole lot of pressure on a true freshman quarterback, but everything I've seen out of Jackson Arnold makes me really believe that he's a guy that would be very capable of stepping in were Dillon Gabriel to get hurt in 2023. Just from a poise standpoint, a preparation standpoint. I mean, what he did to Southlake Carroll on Saturday in the quarterfinals of the Texas 6A state playoffs, like absolutely ludicrous. He threw for 303 yards and 2 touchdowns, ran for $149 and 4 touchdowns. That's back-to-back weeks, I believe, with 6 total touchdowns. Denton Geyer is averaging more points per game during the playoffs than they did during the regular season by a touchdown. Yeah, that's how good this offense has been under Jackson Arnold, and they're getting better in the most important time of the season. and against better competition. And so I look at Jackson Arnold, and I know like the hype is going to be unreal for the kid when he gets to Norman. Like people are already calling for him to be the starting quarterback as a true freshman next year. I don't think that needs to be the case. But I do think he's going to be a guy that's capable of stepping in to play, whether it's a spot start or coming in relief or whatever it may be. I think you can feel comfortable with him at quarterback because I feel like his head is a little bit different than a guy like Spencer Rattler or a guy like Caleb Williams. Not that they're bad quarterbacks, but I think he's just so level and even keel. You know what I mean? Like he's just the way you watch him play. South Lake Carroll, if you're not familiar with Texas high school football, I grew up I went to high school and college in Texas, about the time that South Lake Carroll really came on the scene in the early 2000s. They're one of the more dominant football teams over the last 22 years. Like they've been that good. They won 5 state championships. They were runner up twice. And Jackson Arnold and Denton Geyer just made them look like some other team, like just some random high school team in North Texas. They beat them by 24 points. Like that's how good Jackson Arnold's been. And he looked far and away better than everybody else on the field. So if you go into 2023 and it's Dillon Gabriel and Davis Beville and Jackson Arnold, I think it's okay because I don't think they're going to go to Davis Beville if you had to, get a relief appearance or a spot start out of a backup quarterback. I think you go to Jackson Arnold because he's just that guy. He's a better quarterback than Davis Beville is. He's got the ability to run. He can throw it everywhere you need him to throw it. And he's got the poise and the demeanor to be able to take over a team. Does that mean he will play? Not necessarily. Does that mean he'll usurp Dillon Gabriel for the starting job? I don't think so, because I think Dillon Gabriel is good enough to hold on to that. But I think you kind of put yourself in an okay situation. You know what I mean? Like, if you think about, even under Lincoln Riley, they might have had, Spencer Rattler and Chandler Morris or Tanner Mordecai and, Caleb Williams all like right around the same time, or Jalen Hurts and Spencer Rattler and Chandler Morris. So they had like your veteran starter, your highly regarded, 5-star prospect. And then you had a guy that was a good quarterback in high school, but maybe not seen as like a top tier or elite quarterback at the college football level. And they were perfectly fine with that. And I think that's okay. Like, I think Davis Beville kind of has us all a little bit nervous and a little bit scared, but, and Nick Evers, he was a good quarterback. He was a 4-star player coming out of high school, but I think the talent difference, and this is no disrespect to Nick Evers, but what I've seen out of Jackson Arnold at high school and Nick Evers at Flower Mound, I just think there's a big talent gap.
I'm hopeful that Jackson Arnold can be that guy that's just a, spectacular time freshman to where, again, if you get into a pickle with maybe an injury, that he's good enough that he can step in a la Caleb Williams. And he's just look, he's a 5-star, right? 5-star means that, generally speaking, 5-star means that you're getting the 5th star because they think eventually you're going to be a first-round NFL draft pick, right? So that puts you in pretty rarefied air coming in. So if that's the case, then similar to a Caleb Williams, maybe Jackson Arnold is just so good that absolutely he can come in, and if pressed into action because he's here early, he's ready to go, right? I think generally speaking, we're like, true freshman, I don't know, but he just might be spectacular enough to where that's the case. The other option would be that Dillon Gabriel, unfortunately, it goes so poorly that you just basically decide, yeah, let's go ahead and play the true freshman. I did want to, just before we put a bow tie on some of this Nick Evers stuff and what does it mean for Oklahoma's quarterback situation, I did just want to, number one, wish Nick Evers the best and say good luck to you. I think he's a very talented quarterback. I don't know where he's going to wind up. No information on that. But I do think he's a talented, major college quarterback just based on the recruiting portfolio and profile coming in. But larger than that, I wanted to say the Evers family was awesome in Norman. Just the way that they went about their business on social media was fun to engage with them. And Nick Evers, man, let's not forget, as a Sooner fan base, this kid was so cool that when he got his first name, image, likeness deal what was it? It was for the Make-A-Wish Foundation. And so when we're talking about somebody that's leaving Oklahoma, I do think in closing, it's worth remembering one final time that, man, Nick Evers, a heck of a kid. Wish him the best of luck. I still think he's a super talented quarterback, even though it's clearly not going to work out in Norman, Oklahoma. So wish him the best. Thank you to him and his family for being awesome in Norman, and just think he's a great kid, and it's worth pointing that out.
Yeah, 100%. That Make-A-Wish deal, I think it took Oklahoma fans by storm. Like, it endeared him very much to every Sooner in a part of Sooner Nation, because he wasn't just looking out for himself. He was looking out for others, trying to raise awareness for Make-A-Wish and try to bring joy to people's lives. So, shout out to Nick Evers for that. And we do wish you luck wherever you end up, for sure. And I think there are going to be a lot of options for a guy like him. I mean, he had offers to Houston, I believe Texas Tech and Arkansas, Iowa had an offer, Tulsa. So there were a lot of, really good programs that were going after Nick Evers during his recruitment. So best of luck to him. Hope you land on your feet and find a good place to go show your skills, get an opportunity. So one last thing before we get out of here, Josh, we got to talk about the college football playoff, and we can break this down in further on Monday or on our next show. But TCU loses, just a heartbreaker of a performance at the end. Max Duggan just kind of wills them back in the final, few minutes, gets them a touchdown, and then they score on the 2-point conversion to tie the game at 28. They then get the ball back with like 40 seconds to play and a couple timeouts, but Sonny Dykes decides, maybe I need to give my quarterback a break, and they kneel on the ball, send it to overtime. Man, TCU looked like they had a touchdown a couple different times, and the referee, the officiating, and the way that they spotted the ball. Oh my goodness, man, that first spot that made it 3rd and 1, like, okay, I can get that one a little bit, but then after 3rd and 1, they barely moved it forward at all. When Kendre Miller was basically at the goal line, it should have been like 4th and an inch at that point. And it was crazy, just a crazy finish. And I can't believe that Garrett Riley channeled his older brother and, called some plays at the end that took the ball out of his quarterback's hand and ultimately lost the game. So I don't know. It's just interesting, man. Like, I look back on that overtime against Georgia, Baker Mayfield doesn't throw a pass. Oklahoma loses. Overtime, TCU against Kansas State, Max Duggan gets him down to the goal line. You got 2 plays to score a touchdown, and you don't give your quarterback a chance to make a play. Just interesting.
I just give credit to Kansas State for coming up with the plays. Yeah. I was a little bit less that way. I get the outrage. Oh my goodness. But it's so easy to say that after it doesn't work out twice. I mean, look, you guys, you're a yard away. You got to be able to go get a yard. And TCU multiple times throughout the game has done that, whether it's the read option. I get that that's where you're frustrated. Well, let Duggan go make a play. Guys, you got to be able to move the pile to go get a yard down there.
But when their nose tackle is lined up shaded, or like as the in the A gap, he's not lined up right over the center. Like you have an opportunity to just go left of your center, and there's nobody there. Like, there's a huge hole there, and they just gotta like read the room a little bit and just go just sneak it. And if you're going to go for it on 4th, then sneak it on 3rd. Cause what do you have to lose? Right? Like, you're not going to go backwards. You might not get the touchdown, but you're unlikely to go backwards. So if you're going to go for it on 4th down, sneak it on 3rd down, get yourself even a little bit closer, if not into the end zone, which he probably would have walked into the end zone on that, because there was just nobody in that A gap to the left of the center. So I don't know, just a missed opportunity for TCU, but it doesn't seem like it's going to hurt them much. But go ahead, Josh.
Meanwhile, look, this is a family-friendly podcast, so I won't repeat Kirk Herbstreit's comments, but what got into Kirk Herbstreit at the end of the game with some of the remarks he made on the broadcast in that moment? It's like, oh my goodness, is this the guy that we've grown up with?
So I missed that because I was watching the game just outside of one of my patients' rooms at work today. So I wasn't like fully engaged to the commentary because I had to be, engaged with everything else that's going on. What did he say?
Well, you guys go out there and search it. I won't mention it. It wasn't that bad. It was an interesting joke. Let's leave it at that. It definitely added to the entertainment of the game. Now the question is this, man. what does it mean? What does it mean for TCU? Now, obviously, they brought Nick Saban on and let him kind of politic his case during the Big Ten championship game between Michigan and Purdue. I still think probably TCU's getting that 4 spot, and I think Ohio State. I do think they're going to set up the rematch between Michigan and Ohio State. So I think it'll be Georgia 1, Michigan, Ohio State 2-3, and I think it'll be TCU 4. But, man, when you lose in that game, even though it's an overtime loss, and, yeah, it was a heck of a comeback from 11 points down to get it into overtime, you have opened up the door for if the committee wants to be naughty this holiday season to put Alabama in, you've opened up the door to that possibility. I don't think that's going to be what happens because TCU was undefeated going into the game, and I think probably, even though they're not a Big 12 champion, John, the fact that, look, they'd already beaten Kansas State is going to work into their favor as well. Hey, real quick before we get out of here too, the offer sheet of Nick Evers, do you know one of the schools that was on his offers list? They just hired a head football coach, and it's making some national news.
Oh, Colorado. That's right. Yeah, Colorado. And they just hired Deion Sanders.
Yeah.
Prime Buffs.
So I'm not saying that he's going to Colorado, but I'm saying interesting that he was looking at Colorado, and now they just hired Deion. Is that something that Deion's going to be looking at? I just think that's an interesting wrinkle to follow.
Yeah. Brett Yormark, you got to get the Colorado Buffaloes in the Big 12. Like that, it just fitting. You got to get them in the Big 12. That would make so much fun. Just aside, I love that hire. I love Colorado just going for it. And like, no, we're going to bring in Deion Sanders. We're going to let him do it his way. I mean, it's going to raise the Buffalo's profile back to the early 2000s. Like they're going to bring that whole crew back. Like everybody that was a part of that thing, all those guys that were part of those 90s crew, that 90s team, they're going to bring everybody back. And also shout out to Brett Yormark, like the Big 12 presentation, like the national anthem, getting DJ Khaled to like do the hype video for it. Like that was huge, man. Like I really like what the Big 12 is doing right now. And I said it on Twitter today. I said, I really wish they would have brought in this guy like 3-4 years ago so that Oklahoma could stay a part of this. Cause this is a lot of fun. What's happening in the Big 12 under Brett Yormark, but man, yeah, Nick Evers to Colorado, man, that would be a lot of fun.
So just since we're talking the Colorado and Deion thing, I won't take up a bunch of time here. I know we're about to put a bow tie on this episode. I just would say, look, it's a little bit of a gamble by Colorado, but given where you're at, I think it's a perfect match. It's a perfect match. Colorado's in a place, John, to where, let's call it what it is. I mean, the Buffaloes, they feel a little desperate, right? So if there's a Power 5 program that is, it makes sense to take a little bit of an educated gamble on somebody like Deion Sanders, who really, in some ways, I don't want to be disrespectful here, but let's call it what it is. Maybe he's not totally qualified for a Power 5 head coaching job. I know he did some nice things at Jackson State, but the sizzle that he can provide for Colorado on the recruiting trail, and look, he hasn't won, a bunch, at a group of 5 level, or certainly at a Power 5 level as a head coach. It kind of, even despite that, I think it makes perfect sense for both sides. It's a good, it's obviously, a good paycheck for Deion Sanders, and it makes sense, I think, for him to go try and revitalize Colorado. It's a heck of a rebuilding undertaking for Deion, but it's sort of I don't know. I think it's got a chance to be a home run.
Well, I mean, if he can pull the number 1 recruit from a class to Jackson State, like what will he be able to do for Colorado? Like Colorado, a Power 5 program in the Pac-12 with, they got a sweet look, man. That all black with the gold domes, like that's pretty sweet. You're going to be able to shine that and get prime and some, all black looks. Like that's going to be pretty sweet. I mean, the recruiting is going to take, definitely get a bump. It's going to get a huge bump. If they can pull Travis Hunter from Jackson State to Colorado, that'll be huge. And then who knows what else could follow after that. The door is wide open. Just don't take Joshua Bates. He's ours. You can't have him. I know he's a Colorado legacy, but no, he's coming to Oklahoma. He's locked in. So it's going to be fun to watch to see how that plays out and what happens there, because it's going to be really interesting. I mean, Utah's a good program. Oregon's a good program. USC's on the rise. UCLA is playing good football right now too. So there's definitely like a hierarchy in the Pac-12 that they're going to have to overcome. But I mean, from what we've seen them do at Jackson State, I think he's going to be able to have success, at least get them bowl eligible within a year or two. And who knows, contending for the Pac-12 not long after that. So, I mean, kudos to him. Like he took an HBCU job, turned them into a winner. And now he's taking over a Colorado job that is probably, one of the worst programs in college football right now, and has a chance to really continue to build his reputation and build up a program like that. But yeah, hey, this has been a fun, like, bonus Saturday night edition of Locked On Sooners. Hate that it's focused so much on a quarterback that transferred out. Hate to lose Nick Evers. It's a bummer of a loss. Again, best of luck to them along the way. Hope they find a good landing spot. Hey, go to Colorado. That'd be a lot of fun. Watch you, maybe beat up on old Lincoln Riley there a little bit. But we're going to continue to break down, the college football playoff, what the rankings end up turning out to be on Sunday. We'll continue to talk about the transfer portal, the recruiting, because this is a huge month for the Oklahoma Sooners. They've got to get this month and then the lead up to National Signing Day absolutely right to continue to build the Brent Venables Oklahoma Sooners. But until next time, he's Josh Helmer. I'm John Williams. We'll talk to you then. Boomer Sooner.